This video is brought to you by Boxu. Get $15 off with my code Gaijin15 after clicking the link in the description and go take a bite out of Japanese culture. Hey everyone, Gaijin Goombah here, and look, I'm just gonna be honest with y'all. While the majority of this video is going to be a deep cultural and critical dive into Tonko House's 4-part miniseries Oni Thunder God's Tale, I'm gonna be gushing a lot. Like a whole lot.
I mean, that's kind of expected with you, isn't it?
Yeah, laugh it all up. Oh man, Gaijin Goombah loves a series about yokai and Japanese folklore. Perish the freaking thought. But Oni's a lot more than that. There are aspects of this movie that hit very hard on an emotional level that I'll get into when we get to the spoiler portion of this video. Not only for a Japanese cultural enthusiast like myself, but just as a regular human being. I can't stress enough that there's something for everyone here in this series. Whether you're a Japanese cultural nut, a fan of textured stop-motion animation, a fan of George Takei's amazingly sexy voice,
we kami face a grave situation,
or interested in an uplifting story that isn't afraid to be real about hardship, Oni is for you.
But that's not the whole story, is it? Come on, both you and I know that you were losing your mind with each minute integration of Japanese culture into this movie.
That is very true, and the reason why I wanted to make this video in the first place. As I sat there watching, there were things here and there that kept cropping up that made me point at the screen and go, oh man, I know what that is, holy crap, that's awesome! And at the same time, I realized that these cultural nuggets that give Oni Thunder God's Tale and its characters such a huge level of depth, it would all so easily go over the heads of everyday people. Also, I found out just after watching this that Oni's director and co-founder of Tonko House, Daisuke Daisuzumi, follows me on Twitter, has been following my work for some time and said he'd be honored if I did a video on Oni, and now we're talking, and I don't know what to do. And you know what, Dice? You got it, man. I'm gonna make this video. But I'm gonna say this right now. Before you watch this video of mine, please go watch Oni on Netflix. I cannot stress that enough. This movie is in my top 3 of all time, right next to Kubo and the Two Strings and Spirit Away. What I want to do with this video is enhance the experience for people who have already seen it, but there's no greater experience that I can give you here compared to just seeing this series yourself.
And hey, you know what would go great with 2.5 hours of that Japanese Netflix and chill sesh? How about some real Japanese snacks? None of that big corpo stuff, I mean real mom and pop stuff that's the true taste of the country? Well, Boxu's got you covered.
Yeah, no joke. As Aki and I got snuggled in to watch, we were chowing down on Boxu's Autumn Koyo box that we got this month. Now what's Koyo? Well, it's the Japanese word for the foliage change that makes the forest explode with color. Perfect for Momojigari. So what's Momojigari, you're probably asking? Well, it's the fall equivalent to Hanami. People going out and admiring all the visual splendor that nature has to offer at this time of year. Though technically Momojigari got its start as a Japanese pastime back in the Edo period as a noble person's activity. And no, I didn't just know all that up front. Instead, I actually learned about it from the cultural book that comes with this and every other Boxu box. Also featuring theme-appropriate Japanese to learn, as well as a detailed showcase of every single traditional biteable each box has to offer. For Autumn Koyo though, I'd highly suggest the Yakiimo sweet potato cookie for that Japanese fall feel of baked sweet potatoes, and I can say the exact same about the Countryman Benny Tenchi sweet potato cookies. Yeah, sweet potato cookies, they're really freaking good. And as a wonderful compliment, I'd suggest the Earl Grey Hojicha hybrid tea to wash it all down and keep your insides warm. Oh, this is such a solid combo. So, sound like a delectably good time? Well, if you want perfect Japanese snacks to go alongside one of the best Japanese feel-good movies for the fall, hit up my link in the description and use the code Gaijin15 to get $15 off your purchase. Shipping's free and you can cancel at any time.
So come take a literal bite out of Japanese culture with Boxu.
Alright, with snacks in hand, let's get to the one central thing that I've been dying to talk about with this series. So, it's called Oni, right? Well, what the heck is an Oni? I mean, these days, sure, but if you go back in Japanese history far enough, you'll see that Oni was a catch-all word for all manner of evil spirits and destructive nature. Back in the Heian period, before they were called yokai and before they were called bakemono, they were called Oni. So, okay, a yokai then, you might be saying now. Well then, what the heck is a yokai? It's our main cast, right? I mean, we got a Kappa, a Tengu, Kasobake, and I mean, come on man, Naridon himself is the utter spitting image of a modern-day Oni. Red-skinned, horn, floofy hair, tiger skin outfit, dude's even got a kanabo. But they keep calling themselves kami.
You are on the verge of becoming true kami.
So at this point, you might be asking yourself, why the heck do they call themselves kami when they're so obviously yokai? Well, that's the trick about the difference between yokai and kami. There really isn't one. Now, I know some of you longtime viewers may have heard this before, but for those of you who are somewhat new, when concerning Shinbutsu, which is Japan's unique hybridization of Shinto and Buddhism, kami, yokai, and all their spirits of nature are not concretely segregated in the way that one might think that demons and angels are. Kami can become yokai, and yokai can become kami. The only difference between the two is that kami are positive aspects of nature that are venerated through ritual, while yokai are the negative aspects of nature that are either forgotten by humanity or warded away through ritual, with each kind of spirit being able to take on the role of one or the other. So yes, it is entirely possible for these obvious yokai characters to, in fact, be kami. In fact, I'll do y'all one better. Now, I don't know if Tonko House's team did this on purpose, but with only maybe one or two minor exceptions, I can cite a Shinto shrine or Buddhist temple in real life that venerates each would-be yokai in this series as kami, many of which I've actually personally been to. So let's start off with one of my personal favorite characters, the demure but highly relatable Kappa, who I give special note to as Oni loves to play around with this folklore concept that if Kappa lose the water in their head dish, they lose their power. It's so freaking adorable.
But super adorable aren't really what kappa are. These are the yokai that reach deep in your butt and try to grab your shirikodama, and either end you that way or drown you outright.
Well, tucked away in Tokyo was a little Zen Buddhist temple named Soul Genji, who venerates their local kappa as saviors rather than destroyers, earning the temple its other name of Kappa-dera. I came to find out that the local legend has it that in the 1800s, a raincoat merchant named Kihachi Kappaya invested himself and his own money into creating methods to prevent mass flooding from the nearby Sumida River. But he wasn't alone, as the story goes. Local kappa of the river joined him in the creation of canals, bridges, and drainage systems to keep this area safe. Thus, this is the one place where kappa are worshipped and loved as benevolent kami.
How about characters at the opposite end of the personality scale? Classroom teacher Mr. Tengu and his prim and proper daughter Amaten, who are a Dai Tengu and Karasu Tengu respectively. Cause if you know anything about Tengu, you probably know that they're the culprits of a lot of human woes. From simple instances of kamikakushi, where Tengu would kidnap children for weeks at a time, to being branded the antithesis of Buddhism, leading monks to the selfish, power-hungry ways of Tengu-do, Tengu historically haven't been in a very positive light.
Well, very true, but there are others in Japan that venerate Tengu as powerful and knowledgeable entities of nature who teach their wisdom to their followers, the Yamabushi, practitioners of Shugendo. While there are several examples and locations of Tengu being worshipped as kami, the locale that I've been to personally was perched atop Tokyo's Takao-san, a famous mountain that houses the Yakuo-in, a temple devoted to the practice of Shugendo and the worship of the Tengu said not only to call Takao-san their home, but also the ancient teachers of the temple's predecessors. Featuring not just the temple's central figure, Izuna Daigongen, but also the Dai Tengu and Kol Tengu, with the Dai Tengu being the older, wiser figure, and the Kol Tengu being the younger but enthusiastic figure. A relationship identical to Mr. Tengu and Amaten and Oni. So yeah, Tengu have been and still are seen as protector kami to be venerated.
How about Tanukinta? Tanuki have long been associated with all manner of horrible things. From possessing people through Tanukitsuki, to tricking an old man into eating a soup made of his wife, to tricking people out of goods and services by turning leaves and poop into bills and gold.
Nope! Even then, I've personally been to not just one, but two different shrines devoted to the veneration of Tanuki. Yanagimori Shrine and Chingodo Shrine. Just across the Kanda River from Akihabara sits Yanagimori Jinja. Once completely devoted to Inari, the shrine now features tons of statues of the giant Kintama yokai. A way of saying thanks by Keishoin, mother of the 5th Tokugawa shogun, to the Tanuki Kami Fukuji Inari for blessing her with tremendous luck. Then there's Chingodo Jinja, with the story of the shrine being very similar to Kappa-dera. The monks and abbots of the local Sensoji temple were being harassed by tricks of the local Tanuki, but the two came to an agreement that if the monks build a shrine to the Tanuki, then they would protect Sensoji temple from fire and ruin, which they very much did. Even through the firebombing of 1945 and the Kanto earthquake of 1923, Chingodo, Sensoji, and the entire Denbuin area was untouched.
Okay, how about Dharma and Bella? Two very obvious Tsukumo Ogami. I mean, legend has it that once an item turns a century old, it gains sentience and subsequently makes life a living heck for its owner. Moku Mokuren will steal your eyes, Boro Boroton and Itan Momen will suffocate you, and even Kasobake, which Umbrella is, are known to pester people.
Yeah, but that's only on the stipulation that these items weren't cared for and abandoned in the 100 years of their existence. I've read in stories that those items that were respected and taken care of actually turned into house helper Tsukumogami. So maybe they weren't venerated kami, but they were still, quote, good.
Alright then, Namenhage. Not only are they the local school bullies, but they look the part of classic Heian-era Oni, described as having any combination of eyes, horns, claws, and heads.
Oh, come on, don't be coy. We both know this is a paper-thin reference to the Namahage Oni of Akita Prefecture. Though they're terrifying as all get out, these Oni are actually 100% benevolent and venerated. During the new year, they come down from their homes in the mountains and seek out lazy kids and bad newlywed spouses, and bully them into being good at best, or kidnap them into the mountains at worst. Funny thing is, this is still practiced to this day as people dress up as Namahage and go door to door scaring the crap out of kids and getting mochi and sake to go away. But that's not all they do, because they absolutely rock out with taiko performances, and you all know how much I love taiko.
Speaking of taiko, that comes to the series' second main character himself, Naridon, the lovable goof that turns out to be a nearly all-powerful thunder god. And more specifically, he's Gaijin, one of the earliest known destructive deities who, alongside his brother Fujin, would decimate fields and villages as they competed to see who could cause the most destruction. Banging the taiko drums that hovered around his body, each dong Gaijin swung brought another massive bolt and blast of thunder. Not to mention, people would actually sleep stomach down during storms so that Gaijin's pet dog Bolt Daiju wouldn't nestle inside their navel only to explode out, bursting their bellies in a bolt of electricity. Yes, this is a real thing.
A very real thing indeed, but what you forget is that despite being feared and a historic nuisance to humanity, Gaijin is still venerated as a kami. While the populace feared his lightning, where it struck, the area was seen as a newly blessed land. Lightning, you see, was thought of as divine energy coming from the heavens, so on the fields where it struck, it was believed that the crops would grow ever stronger. Gaijin is also attributed as a savior of Japan. Yeah, remember the dual Mongol invasions that started in 1274? Yeah, those were both utterly obliterated by a massive typhoon, and Gaijin and his brother Fujin were credited for that one. So yeah, for as seemingly terrible as Gaijin and Naridon by proxy are, they are still venerated kami. I could go on, but I think y'all get the picture here. All of these characters who both use and embody spirits of nature, can very easily be kami despite being usually seen as yokai.
Alright, well, let me play devil's advocate for the audience here. All of the above? Well, it all seems pretty circumstantial. Just cause a yokai can become a kami doesn't mean that all of these characters are. I mean, we don't see any shrines devoted to them in the show, so how could they be classified as kami?
See, that's the interesting thing about how the series classifies its characters as kami. Canonically speaking, they're not just called kami, but from the story itself, we learn that their spiritual physiology is also identical to kami.
Spiritual physiology. What an amazing contradiction.
Shut up. You'll understand what I mean when I explain it, but in order to do so, we have to actually address the story now.
Y'all got that? From here, we're getting into the narrative, so if you haven't seen it yet and want to, now's the time.
So the early premise of this series is all about these kami kids trying to develop what's called kushi, and I'll let Tengo explain exactly what that is.
Kushi lives within everyone. It's a gift passed down from your ancestors. Kushi is a special connection to the natural world.
So yeah, to boil it down, kushi is basically the wondrous things of nature that are made manifest in the real world that these kami are able to do, which these kids are... well, they're working on it. I might be thinking that kushi is just this made-up concept specifically for this movie. I mean, we're not exactly given any obvious real-world parallel, but the thing is, there is. As we discussed in our previous video on Wild Hearts, all kami are comprised of 4 different parts of the soul. The Adamitama, the Nigimitama, the Sakimitama, and the Kushimitama. And yeah, I think you already know where we're going with this. The Adamitama is the wrathful, angry part of the soul. The Nigimitama is the polar opposite, the calm and collective side of the soul. The Sakimitama is the part of the kami soul that provides. It's the part of the soul that brings everyday prosperity. Then there's the Kushimitama, which, get this, is believed to have mysterious powers such as causing transformations, curing illnesses, and manifesting other miracle acts of nature. All of which are showcased within the characters of this show. I can't really show you some of them because they're huge spoilers, but trust me when I say that every single example from what I've just said is in the show. So Kushi in this series is just a mere shorthand for the more complicated concept of Kushimitama.
But that's not the only spiritual physiology that Oni addresses about Kami. There's another Mitama that acts as a massive plot point through the show that is never referenced by name like the Kushimitama does. Late in the series, we hear a warning from the school principal who, man, I don't know, is the entire landscape in general, including this pool, which, yeah, Kami can be landmasses, so I guess that checks out. Anyway, the principal warns of the shadow of fear, though realistically is more of a mix of fear and anger, as when the different Kami characters exhibit fear and anger against the Oni, a whipping cloud overtakes them in shadow, feeding off their emotion. It's explained through the character Potato that this is using the anger of nature to strengthen themselves, for their powers to become even more destructive. Anger and destruction. Yeah, these are the two qualities of the Aramitama. Again, going back to the last video we did, we talked about how the Aramitama of the Kami is subdued when it's properly, ritualistically, worshipped based on Shinto principles. Without the rituals from the Shinshoku and the prayers and belief of the people, the Aramitama overpowers the Nigimitama of the Kami, and thus wretched diseases and devastating natural disasters ravage Japan. That, in essence, is what we're seeing with this Shadow of Fear and Oni. The Nigi of all these different Kami characters is being overtaken by the Ara, causing them to become wrathful, destructive, and man, you just gotta watch the ending. You'll know exactly what we're going on about.
Alright, this is the part of the video where I gotta gush just a little bit alongside the analysis, cause like I said, this movie hit me in a way on an emotional level that I never thought it really would. Also, holy crap, massive Act 3 spoilers. Please, go watch this series if you haven't yet. Alright, so later in the story, Onari and Kappa run into this kid, Calvin, who...
A kappa, also known as Kabutora or Suiko. They are normally depicted as green humanoids with a turtle-like shell, and they have a dish on their head that holds water.
Oh my god! It's literally you! Okay, well, not obviously literally, but holy crap, that is so you! Ready to rattle off your encyclopedic knowledge of folklore at the drop of a hat.
Yeah, it is, and this is when the movie decided to gut punch me. You want to know what happens every single time I talk to people in Japan or who are Japanese, hear about Japanese culture and folklore? This. And I've never really known how to take that, if I'm being honest. I mean, maybe it's a response to the shock that some random gaijin actually does know more about Japan than someone from there. Maybe it's a non-insult to insinuate how much I know about something so unimportant, but from that little scene right there, I always felt like I was being called out, and I started paying really, really close attention to what was going on with the series. Then this scene dropped, and I just freaking cried.
You know, I'm Gaijin. It means outside people in Japanese. When my mom moved us here from the States, people looked at me like I was a monster. But the more I learned about Japan, the more I loved it. Especially all the myths and legends and stuff. In Japanese fairy tales, the Oni are always villains. But according to some historians, the whole idea of Oni comes from people who look different from the Japanese locals. They just fear people they didn't understand. They may call me Gaijin, but this is my home now.
Some of you may remember my Gaijin Perspective channel, where I get a bit more personal on my takes on Japan, and sadly YouTube's algorithm and upload policies on new channels have driven that channel into the dirt, so I'll post a link somewhere where you can all understand where I'm coming from. On that channel, I uploaded a video about a year ago talking about how an old story about a misunderstood Oni made me freaking sob, and this scene right here brought me right back to those feelings. Calvin is 100% correct in this statement. Historically speaking, Oni have been a catch-all term for anyone not just outside Japan, but living outside the old Heian court of Japan. Some of the greatest Oni in history, Shuten Doji, Tsuchigumo, the Oni of Onigashima, and so on, they were literally based off people outside of Japan's Yamato-based government. People who were either displeased by the system or those who fought against it as the Yamato court imposed on them. This started, over a millennium of distrust between Japan and the outside world that, sad to say, still exists to this day to some extent. Granted, I'll give credit where credit's due. People in Japan are a lot more worldly compared to where they were 100 years back, and man, especially the younger generation. But there are still times, still people who look at outsiders, who looked at me like I was some kind of freak. Maybe not in Tokyo or anything, where there are a lot more foreigners around, but out in the Inaka or maybe smaller cities, yeah, it still happened. Like, the racial profiling and denial of service due to my race? Yeah, it happened to me. That's why, in my honest opinion, this is the most important message of the entire series. At least to me it is. It ends up becoming the moral backbone of the Act 3 narrative, and I'm happy. I'm happy that a piece of media with this level of love, care, and overwhelming support from the public of both the East and Western sides of the worlds exists. Look, I'll never sit here and say that I, as a white male, will ever fully understand the slugging hellscape that minorities have to go through in life. But in this experience, I felt represented. I love what Dice said to me in the brief exchange that we had on Twitter. I do think there are so many layers of our lives we can relate to. It makes me crying reading it, typing it, and saying it. I don't expect a lot of people to understand. Just this. All of this entire series. God, it's meant more to me than most of the other media that I've experienced in the last decade. So, thank you. Thank you so much to you, Dice, Tonko House, and everyone else who worked on this. It's moving, it's uplifting, it's heartfelt, and it does make Japanophiles like myself get to see so much culture that we love in it. But it also gives me hope, and you can't ask for more than that in something like this. So, thanks for watching, everyone, and thank you, Balksu, for continuing to believe in and sponsor these videos. Again, if you want to get a true and literal bite out of Japan's culture, hit up that link in the description, punch in my code Gaijin15 and get $15 off your purchase. Gonna be changing gears a little bit in November. Still have a lot of choices of topics for patrons to vote on for the next month, but for the actual next upload, I want to indulge in my Warhammer 40k love a little bit more with a special guest to talk about how everyone is completely wrong about the Tau. So, until then, everyone, this is Gaijin Goombah, signing out.